that Israel is in control of the process and that Donald Trump is incapable of making an independent decision so far. So Iran is not backing away from any of its demands for starting negotiations. I think the good news right now is that at least the agreed upon ceasefire that started a week ago Tuesday, it's lasted a week. The first 24 hours almost derailed it with Israel's attacks in Lebanon. But even since then, Israel scaled back those attacks. Yes, the war continues in southern Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah. But by and large, we're not seeing the bombings and attacks on Iranian infrastructure and Iranian civilian sites. And likewise, Iran has backed off and is not attacking U.S. sites. That's the good news. Reportedly, some of Iranian assets have been unfrozen. I have no independent verification of that. But then we're left with the United States deciding it's going to, quote, impose a blockade and start trying to seize Iranian ships coming out of the Persian Gulf, or ships carrying oil from Iran. Now, the insanity of this is 4 weeks ago, Scott Bessent and Donald Trump, and Bessent's the Secretary of Treasury, they lifted all the oil sanctions on Iran because they recognized that the disruption of the oil supply coming out of the Persian Gulf countries was so significant that they needed to make sure they had enough supply on the international market. Otherwise, you're going to get triple-digit price on oil. And so now they're wanting to basically cut back and reduce the supply of oil at a time that we're back up into triple digits on Brent and the West Texas Intermediate crude. There is no rhyme or reason to the Trump administration policy. It's like watching a wheel spin, and wherever it happens to stop, it's more like a roulette wheel. You don't know if it's going to stop on red or black, but it's just spinning and then stops randomly.
What is there beyond the Israel lobby? Do you think there are incentives for the Trump administration itself to keep expanding this war?
No, there are no incentives for it. It is driven entirely by. It's not just the Zionist lobby, but it's the whole Zionist cause, because Trump is surrounded by a bunch of Christian Zionists that his religious advisor, this woman Paula White, I mean, she's a complete fraud, but they're convinced that they are bringing about the end of the world. The Christian version of it is that there will be this battle of Armageddon, and that Jesus, the believers will be raptured up into heaven, and all the wicked will be destroyed, and it's not a very bright future. The Jewish Zionist version of that is that there will be all this death and destruction, and then the Messiah comes to save the Jews. So everyone's got a different story. And in one story, the Christians are victims, and the other story, the Jews are the victims, and the Muslims are the victims in both. It's just, I'm not mocking the religious faith of people. I consider myself a Christian, but I think this obsession with these eschatological visions, where people try to predict and pretend that current events, this is what this book that was, the people that wrote and contributed to this book lived 2,000 years ago, that they saw with clear vision what we are today and how this would unfold. Sorry, I don't buy that. Not at all.
What do you make of the argument that the U.S. itself has so many bases in the region that is critical to the existence of the U.S. empire? Tied to that is also the hegemony of the dollar. For instance, if not for the basis, it would be very hard to give protection to the Persian Gulf states or Saudi Arabia. And if not for them, the whole petrodollar system that is not entirely based on the buying of the military weapons, but also the reinvestment and plugging of that surplus back into the dollar asset market. Uh, there is an argument that says that it is the United States. They also say that there's a China angle to this, given the possibility of emergence of a BRICS currency based on the Iranian ability to export oil to BRICS countries, given support by yuan and other possible BRICS countries. And I've been thinking about this given this new idea or the new message about the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, particularly of the Iranian ports, because I've been thinking about the massive Iranian export of oil to China, which hasn't come down even during the war. So is it just the Israel lobby, or does the U.S. empire also have incentive to keep expanding the war?
Well, I want to go back and change one word in your initial question. You said the United States has these bases. I would just change that to had these bases, because one of the sort of, I think, unexpected results of this unprovoked attack by the United States on Iran is Iran very quickly and effectively began targeting U.S. bases. There were at least 13 scattered around between the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. The Fifth Fleet Naval Headquarters in Bahrain, that's gone. That's basically been wiped out. They will not return there. So that base, consider that closed. Al Udeid, who's probably the next largest base, it's still sort of, it's operating, but at a much reduced level. But Iran has been very effective at basically forcing the United States out of these bases that, and again, they existed for one purpose, to be used to stage attacks against Iran. They actually, I think, based upon conversations I had with some U.S. military personnel before the start of the war, back in say, around February 25th, and now, is the expectation on the 25th of February was that the United States would be able to defend those bases with air defense systems that would defeat whatever Iran launched. And that turned out not to be true. They've now learned that they can't handle it. So, yes, this was, again, part of the extension of protecting the U.S. Petrodollar, and because all of the transactions for oil coming out of the Persian Gulf were supposed to be handled via the dollar. And up to even as of mid-February, Iran was still making payments via Dubai, the financial centers in Dubai. Well, this war now has completely upended that system, where now Iran is stipulating that, hey, you want to buy our oil, you're going to pay for it in yuan, and that money's going to be, those financial transactions will be handled via Chinese banks in Shanghai. So they're no longer using the financial center in Dubai. Dubai, in that regard, has become irrelevant. The number of non-dollar transactions for oil are surging, not falling. So the very system is now threatened. That is true.
And what would be the next step, probably, for the U.S. administration? I'm just asking you to speculate, because I was thinking that this morning the headlines would be there's more bombing in Tehran and other cities in Iran, and Iran would follow up. But the news has been quite silent, if I may use the word. There are talks about the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump has been, of course, lying about how many ships have passed through it.
Right.
Bloomberg says it's 3 or 4. But what next?
Well, there are a number of factors that are at play here. Donald Trump is not driving this train or sailing this ship. He is a figure in the drama. He's a character, but there are other forces at play. I think the growing concern is the economic one, because we're now on day, let's see, we're 13 plus 31, so that's 44. We're 45 days into this war, and there's no end in sight. Even though you've got let's call it a truce, or the ceasefire that will expire next Tuesday. So expire a week from tomorrow. At that point, it's likely the attacks will renew. But before then, the attacks could blow up if the United States starts trying to board Iranian ships, and those U.S. vessels are within 200 miles of Iran's shore. Those U.S. ships will be attacked. And then if any are sunk or destroyed, that is going to, further inflame, and that will expand the war. There still is a negotiated outcome here, where Donald Trump could save face, and the United States could declare victory, but it would also leave Iran in a much stronger position. And that would be that if the United States made a deal with Iran that was basically a resurrection of the JCPOA, but the difference would be that this would be a permanent agreement between the United States and Iran, that Iran would never build a nuclear weapon, and that inspections would be there indefinitely. Because Trump could then claim, unlike the JCPOA, which was limited to just 10 years, this goes on into the future and they'll never get it. He could then declare victory and bring the troops home. That would not that wouldn't eliminate Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz, but what that would mean is a tremendous loss of U.S. power and influence in the Gulf. And remember, all those Gulf states, they signed up with the United States on the belief that, hey, we signed up with you, you got our back. It's like you going out and hiring a bodyguard that's going to protect you, but that bodyguard keeps getting beat up by everyone they come in contact with. At that point, you're going to go, he can't even protect himself. How's he going to protect me? And so you've already seen Qatar and Oman distance themselves from the United States and are developing closer relationships with Iran. The most antagonistic country, let's call it a country, it's really just an artificial creation, is the United Arab Emirates. They are the most strident and aggressive in opposing Iran, and it's stupid on their part. They don't have anything to oppose Iran with. Iran will take them apart, destroy them. The Saudis, MBS is a slippery character. He's been trying to play both sides of it, but I think he is smart enough to recognize that the Iranians hold more trump cards than Donald Trump does. So I think the Saudis would be inclined to work out a deal with Iran, and that leaves Kuwait, which I think Kuwait will find itself back under the control of Iraq. So it's a complete restructuring of what has been the Persian Gulf, and the entire U.S. policy with respect to Israel involving the Gulf was to get those Gulf Arabs to sign on to the Abraham Accords, recognizing the state of Israel as a legitimate nation, and separate and trying to create Iran as the enemy. The attack by the United States and Israel on Iran on February 28th completely destroyed that. It may turned Iran into a sympathetic victim. And Iran, in my judgment, has been making very effective use of that situation.
Robert Pape of University of Chicago argued that the war has led to Iran emerging as one of the four major global powers, and his argument is that primarily it is based on geography, but also how Iran has been now able to control 20% of energy resources, add 11% of Russian energy resources to that, and the Chinese need and potential of buying them or consuming them. He says that 1/3 of energy resources concentrated on Russia, China, and Iran makes Iran one of the four major powers. I asked this to Ambassador Chas Freeman yesterday. He said that he would not go to the extent of saying that Iran is one of the four major powers, but he says that certainly it has elevated Iran's position in the region. I wonder what your response are to this kind of conversation.
Yeah, I go with Chaz on that one. Look, this there's a story about the dog chasing a car, and then it actually catches the car and it looks around going, now what do I do? You know, that's how I view. I don't think Iran at the outset of this anticipated that they would have the kind of control or influence on the global economy that has been achieved. That maybe there was one or two within the Iranian government that had sat down and scoped this all out and thought it through. But I really don't think they had this as a, they sat down in a group and said, okay, here's the plan, guys. We're going to shut down the strait. We're going to, and then when the United States we'll shut it down after we're attacked, and then we're going to start taking out all of this infrastructure in Qatar, the liquid natural gas, the urea, the helium, the sulfuric acid, all that on top of the oil, and we're going to cause global chaos. I don't really think they anticipated doing that, but that has been the result, and as a result of that, just like if you win the lottery, you may have gone from being, making minimum wage, all of a sudden now you're a billionaire because you won the lottery. Well, Iran won it sort of, let's call it the geopolitical lottery. They are now in a position that you have to deal with them, and you have to take them seriously, because no country in the world has the leverage to force a change in Iran. It can't be done by just dropping bombs from the air. The only way to really do that would be to invade the country and take control of it. Well, it's a big country, and what you're talking about on that would be a military operation of a scale that we haven't seen since World War II. And it would require a massive logistical effort. So that's why I say it's impossible. I mean, you can sketch it out how it's theoretically possible, but in practical terms, not possible. So now here, Iran now gets a seat at the table because of its ability to control this such a high percentage of the world's essential energy assets, and by virtue of its location in the Persian Gulf and controlling the entrance to the Persian Gulf. It is they're not, though. They've achieved that status in part because of their partnership with Russia and China, and Pape is correct that Iran's position geographically as sort of a crossroads for both north-south economic activity with Russia and east-west with China. It's the terminus of the Silk Road, going from China through Iran, uh, that it will play an increasingly important role in the world economy going forward. And that world economy is now going to be separated from the petrodollar economy. That that is what the war in Ukraine, the Western reaction to try to punish Russia, the Western actions to try to isolate and punish China, it persuaded both of those countries to come together, accelerate their efforts to develop an alternative financial system, which in BRICS, and now with the attack on Iran, this further solidifies Iran's entrance into the BRICS movement, and the BRICS countries, ironically, will end up controlling a significant majority of the world's energy resources. Now, you've heard Donald Trump. He keeps saying this. He says the United States has more oil than Russia and Iran combined. No, sorry, not true. It's a lie. The United States produces a little more barrels per month or per day than does Iran or than does Russia, but not that. And this includes Saudi Arabia too. It's just not true. So Trump is he's making bets on bad information, and that needs to be corrected. So we're really witnessing the emergence of a new world order, and Iran is going to be a very important player in that order. And again, there's been such animus in the West directed at Iran, claiming, accusing them of being these religious fanatics that, they blow themselves up and kill anybody and are intolerant, ignoring the fact that to this day, one of the largest Jewish communities in the Middle East lives in Iran and have been there for 2,500 years or more. That's with all the changes that have taken place within Iran over the years, that is a remarkable statement, and so it is. The Western propaganda with Iran is difficult to overcome, but that's what we're witnessing, I think, right now.
And how long do you think this war would go on? I'm thinking about the Ukrainian analogy. I mean, the U.S. and the West provoked as much as they could. They expanded NATO. They expanded CIA activities to the extent that, and of course, they did color revolution. They pushed the entire country towards a civil war. And when Russia launched the special military operation and started taking up territories and dismantling the army, it was difficult for them to get off ramp because it was a humiliating defeat. So they just continued. But the difference was that in Ukraine, they had a proxy. Now the U.S. is directly participating in the war. So, of course, the U.S. Seems to be unable to accept defeat, and that's why they are not able to accept what seems to be the maximalist demand from the Iranian side. But now, of course, the Iranians won't go back to the level in which they were at Muscat or in Geneva before the Vienna talks were scheduled. I'm talking about the negotiation prior to the war, as the Omani foreign minister Basal Mohammed bin Al Busaidi said that that Iran conceded a lot and they were close to arrive at a acceptable negotiation. But now it seems to me that the U.S. can't accept the defeat, and they also can't win this war. So would this be a long, prolonged war, or what is the way forward?
Yeah, no, I think there will be some limitations on it. For not, if it was up to Iran, yes, Iran could fight this indefinitely. This is one that they're really under no time pressure. The time pressure is on the United States and Israel. Israel, by virtue of its size and lack of indigenous resources, they cannot continue this indefinitely without massive support from the United States. And the United States has elections coming up in November. The economic effects of this war have only started to affect the American people. It's going to get worse. We've already seen a dramatic turnaround in attitudes towards Israel in terms of U.S. relationship with Israel. Growing dissatisfaction, unhappiness, the perception that the United States has sold its soul to the Israelis, that the policies being made at the expense of America first, that it's Israel first. So I would think that the Trump administration will be under great pressure to figure a way to end this, even if they have to, swallow some pride and walk away by August. They don't want to go into the November election, which I think, frankly, is already lost, but they might still have a chance to recover, except, the odds are they're going to be looking at higher inflation and lower economic growth by then. But it'll be the United States under pressure to try to end it by August, before they get into the fall. It's going to be, if it continues, it'll be a tremendous economic drain on the United States, because you have to step back and say, okay, what kind of operations can they run? They're going to be entirely reliant upon air operations. They cannot put troops on the ground. If they put troops on the ground, those troops are going to be killed. And then they're going to be stacking body bags. And that certainly creates a political problem. Similarly for Israel. Israel doesn't sit on unlimited supplies of bombs and weapons. And if the United States decides, hey, we got to cut back, we can't continue to supply you at this rate, Israel's going to be, they're going to face an existential crisis. Already we've had the chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Forces. This was 2 weeks ago. He went in and briefed the government and said, guys, we got red warning lights flashing all over the place. We're going to collapse. We can't continue doing this. So there's still a number of variables at play. And then let's not forget, the whole Jeffrey Epstein affair is not dead. And Melania coming out the other day, claiming she didn't know Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. The blatant lies on her part. I mean, she's a classy lady, but you got to ask, why was she doing this? And it appears it was to try to get ahead of a story that's supposed to break today from one of her oldest friends, who is going to tell all about the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and the Trumps.
I have two final quick questions. So first off, what do you make of this Pope versus Trump thing that's flaring up in the news? Donald Trump said the Pope is weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. What do you make of what's going on?
Why pick a fight with the Pope when Trump is already, we had the Western, let's call it the Catholic side of the Christian church celebrated Easter a week ago Sunday. And in the eyes of many Christians like Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump desecrated Easter that day by issuing these most vile social messages, calling the Iranians a bunch of motherfuckers and crazy, and just using the most obscene language. And then he concluded that tweet with "Praise Allah." It's like, and Tucker, I think, correctly interpreted that as Trump making fun, ridiculing the Islamic religion. And he says, you just don't do that. And I think Tucker is absolutely correct. And then yesterday, Orthodox Easter Sunday. What does Trump do? A, attacks the Pope. B, puts out this image on his social media page presenting him like he's Jesus. With everybody looking up at him like he's some angel descended from heaven and healing a sick man on a bed. It was just, and Trump posted that. That wasn't like some staffer did it. Now some staffer clearly had to put that together, and Trump had to tell him, yeah, here's what I want. Let's, put this together, and then he puts it out. I really believe that he goes back to that assassination, the 2 assassination attempts, and believe that he's now ordained of God to accomplish a great mission for Israel. I mean, that's what's driving him. So in attacking Pope Leo, Trump just created another group of political enemies that he didn't have the day before. It just is so unnecessary, so wrong-headed, but it's gonna resonate, and many Catholics I know are just they're livid about it.
My final question: Trump also said today the U.S. may stop by Cuba after it deals with Iran. Of course, I have a special interest in Cuba for reasons I'm not going to elaborate here. I've been reading Cuban history for a very long time for my interest in what kind of economic systems actually work for humanity. But given the proximity of Cuba, given the kind of assault and sanction regime that the U.S. has slapped on Cuba for more than, 50, 60 years, do you see a direct military attack on Cuba coming soon?
No. Got to step back and say, okay, let's say we put military forces in to seize control of the island. We will then face guerrilla attacks because there will be insurgents. And so then again, the United States will get bogged down in trying to control a country that it is off our, it's near to our coast, but it doesn't have natural resources that are essential to the United States. I mean, they have great cigars, they have good rum from the sugar cane, but they really, beyond that, it would just be another Caribbean island. If it was invested in the proper way, that would be a great vacation spot. It is historically, particularly during, let's say, starting in the 1920s, Cuba played a major role as a site for organized crime, for movement of liquor into the United States to avoid prohibition. The mafia, the Italian mob, but also the Jewish mob, set up operations in Cuba for gambling and such. So gambling, prostitution, drug trafficking. Cuba played an important role there. When the revolution came, and the leadership, the dictators were overthrown by a quote communist uprising. It was a popular. This was not something manufactured by the Soviets. The Soviets did see it, and hey, they will support it. But Cuba became this defiant little country that would not bend its will to the United States, and has paid a terrible price since then. So again, I try to walk through my mind. Okay, we seize it. Then what? Are we gonna start putting U.S. taxpayer dollars into Cuba to improve the lives of the people? I mean, the Cubans will appreciate that up to a point, but you will have former government operators that will then go underground, and they will conduct an insurgency that will be costly to the United States, and then put the United States in the position of having to go start killing Cubans that we thought we were saving. I mean, it's just, you know, there's a way out of this. Lift the sanctions on Cuba. Have free trade. And then all of a sudden, the people will be free to decide what kind of country and government they want without the pressure of the United States feeling it has to control every aspect of it. But, you know, we're too stupid to want to do that. We keep wanting to insist that we have to control everything.
Well, in 1959, the people did decide what kind of systems and country they would like for themselves. The U.S. didn't like it much,
Yeah.
and we came very close to a nuclear holocaust. But Larry will leave it there, and thank you so much for your time and appreciate your answers.